What is the Progress of Shinsight course, and what is it exploring? How is it new this time, and what are we going to go over? What is the overarching set of themes that we're going to explore? So what is the course? The Progress of Insight is a map of awakening, an early Buddhist map of classical awakening. What are the stages that you would experience along this map? It is sort of an overarching view of benchmarks that you should look for along the path. The contribution that Shinzen made is a sort of periodic table of all of the world's meditation elements. So because of that, you can create these kind of laser-guided types of meditation that really pull certain nuances out of our experience. We're using our all of our senses rather than just one sense gate that we start with and we stay with that, like watching the breath. And we're laser focusing on specific insights. I'll talk about exactly what those insights are in a moment, but so that's what the course is. It's going to be using the tools of later Buddhism and non-duality right from the beginning to show us and give us insight into this very dualistic path of classical awakening. It's dualistic because it sees the world as objects, and then you really quickly and you over time really learn how to really break down these objects, and then from there you end up seeing the sort of interconnected and sort of flowing and non-dual nature of each of these experiences. And so you sort of find a non-dual way of experiencing through duality. How is it different? This time we've really revamped the entire course to make it much more streamlined. Before it was a bit of it like a drinking from a fire hose, where it was just all of the different things I've taught people over the years about the path of classical awakening, and sort of, here's everything, here's the whole thing. And that's been radically stripped down, and we're doing like 3 meditations per section and really getting into specific skills and then exploring variations within that, rather than, the fire hose of all the possible variations. The course itself is going to also be a little bit more focused on group interactions and using what's called social noting and other social practices to speed up the process, which is actually quite traditional because meditation is not a solo experience. Meditation is a group experience. It always has been. Any significant growth has always been really communal, and rather than it being this sort of, American idea of the solo cowboy, there's also going to be time for the group itself to basically really get to know each other and talk about community, because it's the community field that often helps drive the practice and the interest forward. So we're all talking about our practices and our experiences in a way that's rad, and so that's going to be a major part of it. As far as the insights themselves, I'm going to talk about these maybe a little bit out of order from the classical map. There are very specific insights. So one, Nama and Rupa, the idea that there's a mind and a body, and that that's like the primary duality of this entire system. I like to start out showing that there are objects and non-objective experiences, that there is the ordering structure, the naming structure of the mind, and then there's raw sense data. But if you look at the evolution of meditation, a very simplified version of meditation is that a good meditation means we're looking at our raw senses without any conceptual layer on top. But the insight of Nama Rupa shows us that if we look closely at this conceptual layer, this is actually just more raw sense data. Even concepts themselves are just raw sense data. Then we move on to cause and effect, which is the seeing that one sense experience is often triggering another one. And this might be very obvious for some, but it's very helpful to see that the objects of our experience, these sense experiences that we have, are not independent, really. They're even just constantly being pushed and triggered by all of the other experiences. So if I make this sound, the mind will very quickly flash an image of what made that sound. You probably don't think it's a dog barking, and you don't think it's a car honking. The mind produces an image of what that was. So one sensation will trigger the next, and that's so much of our experience is a sensation triggering the next and triggering the next. Then we start getting into territory where everything that is arising, or everything that we are noticing, is sort of brand new. It's sort of just appearing, and we sort of, if we look at the floor of consciousness, like there's things that appear into consciousness and they disappear, sort of thing. What we're looking at is the instant they appear. So start noting that. And in Vajrayana, they call that sealing practice, because we're sealing the sort of spout of present moment experiencing. So we're just looking at everything that is new as it appears. Now, once you can get that insight, you can then reverse the insight, as strange as that sounds, and look at each time something is constantly dying. It's constantly disappearing. And something Shinzen told me once, which was lovely and very helpful for me, was that the disappearing of experiences, the gone of any experience, is a tiny nirvana. So this is so we're talking about arising and passing, which is a major, or it became a very popular point in the Progress of Insight map, and everyone feels like this is it, this is the thing I want. And what I want to talk about is that when I had a very deep experience with this, sort of, you could say, stage, or some of these benchmarks, I luckily had Shinzen there, and Shinzen said, the Theravada model of arising and passing can actually tend to fortify a sense of self, because it's a temporal model it seems like it's occurring to a self. It's arising and passing from my perspective. And that later Buddhism changes the model to be a spatial model, rather than it being about time arising and passing. It's about space being empty. And so to bring that relationship of emptiness is actually not non-temporal, but it doesn't rely so much on arising and passing. We can actually bring the emptiness into everything, and as it's arising, it is already absent, it's gone. And I made another video about that recently, which is called The Void. So if you're watching this on replay, I'll see if I can put a tag up, I think, over here for that video now, if you want to explore that in particular. But the seeing the emptiness of that experience from the very beginning is very helpful, because we don't even need to see things arise to see that they are empty. So this particular moment right now, there's a sense of presence that is here, and that presence, this might sound very weird, points to its own absence. It is itself. There's this, what we're experiencing, and then not this, which is the absence of this present moment experience, which sounds contradictory to the mind, but experientially, that's actually very easy to experience. From there, often in the classical map, you would get into territory around the dark night, or territory that is can be very disturbing. Now, what's happening there, from my perspective, looking at it from like an internal family systems theory perspective, is that there's and I actually talked to Daniel Ingram about this, is like, would you feel that this would be a fair description of what's happening? The dark night could be described as a part of us that wants freedom and sees freedom and is going for freedom, and it just feels the entire pull of that. And other parts of us that want safety, and they want stability, and they want the world to be kind of how they're used to. And those parts are fighting each other. And usually what happens is we say, like, just screw that part that wants safety and security. Let's get rid of that, and we'll just go for freedom. That's what we really want. But what happens is this part fights back permanently. Like, it can create a situation that's very, like, lots of turmoil within. But if we can show this part that it's actually safe and it's secure, and it can actually rest in the awareness and rest in the openness of which is the practice we did today, the sort of kind, spacious awareness, that part, if it can actually experience that, it's actually like, fine, oh yeah, sure, we can let go, that's no problem. That's one reason why some practices have a sort of softer path through. This is, if you've ever heard of the Mind Illuminated, you know that this is that one of their claims to fame is that they don't have the dark night, or it's very minimal, or this kind of thing. Whether that's true or not is, I won't address, but I think one of the reasons why they would tend to have less of an extreme experience of that sort of polarity between the freedom parts and the safety parts is because the safety parts have been introduced to awareness from the very beginning. So another aspect of this course is that every one of the insight-based practices is going to be bonded with an insight-heavy nurture positive practice. As we're looking at non-self as an insight, we are also looking at what we talk about as the multiple self model, or internal family systems model, to see that there's this sort of experience of multiple selves, all of us whom are like deserving of kindness and gentleness, and that those two actually meet really beautifully together. As we're looking at cause and effect, we're looking at how we can produce, kind words within our mind and have a kind relationship to the people around us, and see that cause and effect is also, we can influence that to be in a sort of positive direction. So we're pre-programming that the difficulties that may come in the path, we're already learning the skills to get through those already. So that's how we're planning ahead for any dark night experiences that might be difficult. From there, we go into a stage or a process or part of the path that is often very elusive, which is the equanimity stage. And it can be very confusing as to how do we move from this thing that's very active and very polarized and to something that is very, very, in a sense, neutralized. Well, the good news is we've actually been working on that from the very beginning, which is working with practices that are awareness-based and seeing the qualities of that awareness. And so we're learning to rest within that awareness and let that awareness, let the emptiness of that awareness sort of drain the narrative and object quality of any of the sensations that we've been experiencing before. And that equanimity meets really perfectly with the nurture positive practice, because we're learning to have that kind of peaceful, spacious, open equanimity, that kind awareness with all of our experiences through all of our day. So the path is not just something we're going to be doing on the cushion, but we're bringing into our lives as much as we possibly can. And then there's also, we're thinking about doing a retreat in the middle of this to sort of emphasize some of the practices. That's not even to mention the fact that we're doing an in-person retreat in about half a year on the West Coast. So that's a whole other shebang. But that's the general breakdown of what the Progress of Shinsight course is, using later Buddhist meditation technology on an early Buddhist map to help us actually propel faster and deeper through the map and sort of get past certain challenges that might be otherwise challenging. If you want to register for the course or find out all about it, everything we're doing, the schedule, everything, just go. It's deepmindfulness.io/POS. It's a 6-month course that meets every week for 6 months, and all of the dates and everything are on the at the link, so you can see what those are and you can see if it fits for your calendar.